Much for joining. Such a treat to have a chance to be here with you and to connect and to share just some thoughts on this topic. What we can do, as usual, is to go through a bit of meditation to settle our mind, to begin to get settled in. And one of the things that I'd like to encourage you to think about when we're doing this initial meditation is just when we're focusing on our body, how similar our body is, just on a physical level, to everybody else, to other people. Sometimes I think about as humans, we differentiate ourselves really, really strongly from everybody else. We think, I'm very different from everybody else. But if you were to look at like another species like penguins, you look out at a bunch of penguins, you've got 10,000 penguins. And then how strongly do you discriminate between one penguin and the next penguin? You'd say more or less they're all probably having kind of a penguin-y experience. Um, there are differences, I'm sure, between the individual penguins and personalities and so forth, but roughly speaking, they're all having a very penguin-y experience. So of course, there's many, many differences between us as humans, but in a sense, we're all having just a very human-y experience. And at first, it can even be a little bit funny, awkward for us to kind of acknowledge that that's the case, that we're not that special. But it's really very, very helpful for us, I think, in countless ways, to appreciate just how similar we are to other people. So we'll just focus on that humanness of ourselves in this initial meditation. Okay, so we can start by finding a comfortable position. We can stretch a little bit if that helps. If we're feeling uncomfortable, just find a comfortable position wherever we're sitting. We begin just by taking a deep breath in and out. And then we can breathe again and just invite ourselves to relax. And then we breathe again and just ask ourselves, what is important now? And we just try to become aware of our surroundings in the present, where we are, where we're sitting. Any sounds around us. And we become aware of our body. And we can think, despite all of the differences there may be between myself and other people, to what extent can I understand myself by just thinking I'm human? Just understanding that I'm having a human experience. This is a human body, human mind, human experience. What does that entail? What does that feel like? What's it feel like to be human now? There's the physical experience of what our body is like, the weight of our body, the pains, the comforts. Then there are the emotional aspects of our human experience. Anxiety, calmness, anger, feeling of fitting in or not fitting in. And then for the last minute of our meditation, we can set an intention for our time this morning. We have a brief time together. What do you want to get out of this time? What is your wish, your intention for this time? And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. Okay. This I've been coming back again and again over the course of these classes to this idea that humans are storytelling primates. It's kind of it tries to touch on both the humble aspects of ourselves, that we're basically just another animal or another primate, but also the magical, amazing, transcendent aspects of human beings, that we can have all these huge concepts and big ideas. And the way we tell stories is interesting, because part of the story we tell is who we are and what's happening to us and where we fit in or don't fit in and who other people are. So that's a big part of the story that we tell. And I was very struck not too long ago. I saw a video summary of an experiment that they'd done on human empathy. And they actually, as a lot of experiments these days go, they put people in an MRI machine, and they would show them these video pictures of 9 human hands, like 3x3 human hands, and just they were sitting there watching the video. And then one of the hands would get an injection, just a needle going in, carefully, and giving an injection, pulling out. Nobody likes that. We all feel a little bit, we all feel a little tinge. Even by describing it, you're probably feeling like, oh, ooh. That's a natural reaction. And they measured what happened to people's brains when they saw these reactions. And they noticed this phenomenon that's called mirroring, which is that we have a reaction when we see someone else experiencing pain that activates the exact same neurons as if we received that shot ourselves. So if you're coming in, receiving the shot, there's a little bit of nervousness up front, there's a little bit of a reaction to pain. And then when you see somebody else having that shot, just even in a video, there's a bit of nervousness as the needle comes in, there's a bit of pain. You're getting more nervous the more I talk about this, probably. And then what was interesting is they put labels on each of those hands, like religious labels, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, Baha'i, whatever. They put in one experiment. And then another experiment, they did national labels, American, Argentinian, South African, whatever. And what they found is that when people identified with one of those groups and the needle was going into the hand of the person in that group, they had a strong reaction. But they had a significantly lesser reaction when the needle went into the hand of some other group. And if you go back to the religion thing, atheists take pride in saying, well, we don't get caught up in these sort of dogmatic, sectarian struggles. But atheists would feel more empathy for other atheists getting a needle injection than they would for religious people, or people of all these religions. And it all just comes back to this idea of who do we identify with and who's the in-group and who's the out-group. And that everybody has this bias. I didn't mean to get into this, but let's just call this our election day special, right? This is everybody has this in-group bias and out-group bias. And that bias is super strong and it's super universal. And so if you join a new company, when you're not in that company, you're biased against the company. If you become part of the company, you're biased towards that company, right? If you move to a new area, you've got a new sports team, you're biased towards that sports team, perhaps, unless you hang on to your old hometown team. So how we define ourselves is really interesting and quite important. Do we strongly identify with being, American or this or that? Or do you identify with something more broad, like being a human, for example? Just thinking I'm a human, all of these people are humans. And we're basically all cousins. All humans are cousins. So you know how it is? It's like your first cousin, and then there's your second cousin, and then your third cousin, and fourth and fifth. So we're all cousins. It just varies in degree. Tuche and I are 243rd cousins, somewhere like that. So we're all roughly family in a sense. And what's funny is one practice I do sometimes is just looking at people and just thinking, this is my brother, my sister. And it's funny, it changes your mind a little bit, or thinking that they're your cousin. It changes your mind, actually, just having that identification. You feel immediately closer to that person. There's something deep in us about that. And it's very instinctive. We, as I mentioned at one point, we just got a new dog, and it's a little dog, and we've had one other dog previously, and now our old dog is shunning the new dog, like doesn't want to play with it, doesn't want to, and feeling a little bit, and my wife is very sort of sensitized to the dog's emotional states. And I've not been sensitized to dogs' emotional states, really. That's just not something that I've adopted. But I feel like my whole life has been a series of gaining blindingly obvious realizations. It just takes at age 40, you realize, oh, right, that's obvious. How come I didn't realize that immediately? I think I tend to think of instincts like what are animal instincts? It's hunger, anger, wish to mate, fear. These are what I tend to think of. But animals also have this in-group sense and out-group sense. And do I belong? And am I loved or am I appreciated? It's funny. We don't want to personify animals projecting human emotions, but maybe it's more appropriate for us to recognize that a lot of our human emotions are actually just animal emotions. We're pack creatures. We're pack animals. We have a sense of do I fit in or do I not fit in? Even here in this group, do you fit in this group? Do you not fit in? I don't know. I'm wondering, like, is, are these teachings useful? Are they not useful? So we all have, in whatever, from whatever position, point of view we're in, we all have this natural sense, right? Do I fit into a social group? And that's just a deep, deep, deep tendency in our mind. So I think broadening that scope of our view is always helpful. Identifying, for example, with all humans, or even with all living beings, just thinking we're just a living being. We're just another animal, arising out of the earth, all these natural resources in the earth and some DNA and some, combine them all, and grows into a living being. So that's just some context and some thoughts on being human, as opposed to strongly identifying with ourselves. So I talked about previously this topic of motivation and how do we build and sustain motivation. And I mentioned that motivation has these three aspects: alignment, finding something that fits your natural inclinations; envisioning, developing a vision of what you could accomplish or what you could be, and so forth; and then resilience. So today we'll talk more about resilience. And the point with resilience is it doesn't take long after you start getting motivated towards something. You find something that's aligned and you envision a future. It doesn't take long before you hit some obstacle, and that's where resilience comes in. So resilience, there's these three aspects to maintaining resilience. One is just inner calm, and the second is emotional resilience, and the third is cognitive resilience. Means just like a new way of, in essence, these three are, the first is just maintaining a balanced internal state of mind. The second here, emotional resilience, is being able to absorb a wide range of, being able to absorb challenging emotions, being able to absorb a little bit of pain without getting disturbed by it, a little bit of disappointment, and so forth. And then cognitive resilience is about developing new ways of thinking about our situation that help us to adapt better. And so resilience, you can imagine, if you think about your motivation as like a little small plant, right? Like a little sprout. They're all very, very fragile when they're first born. You step on a little plant and it's done. But as the plant grows, it can become a bit more robust and a bit more hardy. But these plants need some resilience. They need to be able to endure different levels of heat and cold and dryness and water and being stepped on and so forth. So similarly, as we're building our own motivations, building our own inner strength, our ability to carry out a wish, we need a resilience that is able to persevere in the face of difficulty. So first instruction, don't panic. This comes from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which old sci-fi book. Don't panic is your basic instruction. So that is, you can go a long, long, long way with just this one instruction. This is back in the topic of inner calm. When we get some bad news, for example, there've been, anyway, we've all experienced situations where we get bad news, we worry, a project doesn't work out, something like that. The first and most important instruction we can have is just don't panic. Just accept and acknowledge the current situation. So I made a list of some things that are normal. This is a traditional, it's actually a traditional chant that monks and sometimes would do. Death is normal. Sickness is normal. Loss is normal. All these things are actually normal. Mistakes, confusion. And one of the reasons why we experience pain is because we feel very, very special. One of the challenges that we have in being resilient is there's a natural tendency to feel very special and feel like we are uniquely going through these situations, like nobody else is confused, in their job, right? Everybody else knows what they're doing. Nobody else is confused. Nobody else is having conflict or miscommunication in their relationships and so forth. Nobody else is feeling frustrated or disappointed. And what happens is, because we feel, there's a flip side of feeling that we're special, and that is feeling that we are especially unfortunate. So it's sometimes people try to encourage themselves and encourage others by pointing out how special they are, but you need to be a bit careful with that, because all of these things are entirely normal. And in fact, feeling that these things are normal can help us to be very relaxed in the face of these things. And instead of being worried by them or disappointed, or instead of them causing us to lose our motivation, lose our strength, lose our feeling of good fortune and so forth, we just think these things are normal. And so the mindset that is most useful in my mind in terms of building resilience is this mindset of patience. And this is the traditional term that is used. Patience, in this context, normally we think about patience as just, being willing to wait around. That's often the association that patience has in our modern world, just being willing to wait in line, for example, without getting angry. But waiting in line is only one of countless situations that can disturb us and to cause us to be angry or irritated. So patience really means having an open mind and happily accepting a given situation, with this qualification, having given up the thought that things should be different from how they are. Now, that's interesting because it's not saying that we shouldn't make effort to change things. It's not saying that we shouldn't make effort to make things better, but it means that we need to recognize that everything that is happening right now is coming from some kind of causes and conditions. One of the teachers that I admire, he was a physicist originally before becoming a sort of a specialist in business organizations, how they run. He says, from the point of view of physicists, there are no conflicts. According to physicists, there are no conflicts. Like in normal human society, we say there's lots of conflicts. I want this, and this person wants that, and so forth. But from a physicist's point of view, there are no conflicts because everything is the way it is for a reason. There's been some sequence of causes and conditions that has led to the current situation, and it may be a terrible situation, painful, unfortunate, and so forth, but there are reasons why it has unfolded. And it's knowing that can allow us to have acceptance of the current situation. Normally what happens is that there's a disconnect between the way we think things should be and the way that we're perceiving them to actually be. And the word should is funny, right? Like, where does that come from? Like, why should they be different? Like, who said they should be different? That should is just a conflict between our inner story about the way the world should be. It's only this inner story that says should, right? Some conflict between our inner story and then what we're observing. So the reality, the immediate experience of what we're observing, if it conflicts with, what we believe should be the case, then there's a pain, right? And we can think about ourselves, like, I should be more confident. I should be more, disciplined. I should be more this, more my wife or my dogs should be better like this and that. So all of these shoulds, so many shoulds, we just layer them, one on top of the other. Everybody that we work with should be better, should be more like this, should be less like that. What that is, it's just our layering our stories on top of what we observe. And it is the opposite of accepting the actual situation. And so if you want to change the situation, you have to accept it first. And that's the irony. So you think about teaching a child a subject like math, right? If you just keep focusing on how the child should be better at math than they are right now, what can you do with that? Like, where can you go with that? If you just keep thinking they should be different, how can How can you improve on that? But if you focus on what they do know, okay, they know numbers, right? And they know some basic addition and multiplication. If you focus on what they do know, then you can help them to take the next steps. But this word, it's a very, it's an incredibly common word, should, and I'm sure I sneak it into my speaking all the time, right? But we should do this, we should do that. But we need to be a bit careful, because it's a tyrant, this mind. It's a tyrannical mind. You should be different. It's actually a mind of like power and control and impatience and so forth. So some of resilience is just acknowledging that this is the way things are right now. There's nothing that I can do different. That this is the way things are right now, and then we can ask ourselves, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And so I made a list, and I'll get into this a little bit more on Tuesday, filling in some of these details. But how to respond to difficulties, there's 3 directions you can take this in. You can respond to difficulties by trying to cultivate a different kind of emotional response. You can respond to difficulties by cultivating a different intellectual response, or you can respond to difficulties just through your determination, by increasing your determination. And so all of these start with acceptance, right? So if you accept a situation, if you can use it to improve your emotional response. So for example, one of the things that I like to do is empathize with others who are experiencing the same thing. If I'm experiencing, if I'm experiencing some pain in my body, like I've got a headache or something, I try to empathize with everybody else who's got headaches. It's a totally different way of responding to that situation, but basically thinking this is just part of the human experience. We have pain in our body. It's totally normal. And I try to imagine that this is not different from anybody else's, and that I'm not special. And what that does is actually unlock some more empathy. And then with empathy, we can then be kind. We can have a mind of kindness towards ourselves and towards others. And sometimes we may feel some natural kindness towards others, but maybe we don't feel as much kindness towards ourselves. And so this is where part of the emotional response is feeling kind towards ourselves. Exactly the same way as if somebody else had this pain, how would you react towards them? You'd feel kind. You'd want to be kind towards them. So we can be kind towards ourselves. The intellectual response to difficulties, one of them is just learn, right? Like, okay, I tried to create this presentation and nobody liked it. That's very disappointing to me. What can I learn about that? Well, of course, there's a lot that I can learn about that. Okay, it needs to be simpler, or, people need a little bit more preparation. There's a lot that you can learn from these situations. And then on the basis of the learning, you can experiment. And experimentation is by definition a very sort of gentle mind. It's a sort of probing, checking mind. You try something, see if it works, but you're not overcommitting. That's the key with experimentation. You're not overcommitting, you're just checking and seeing what happens. But of course, a lot of times when people talk about resilience, it's these, ultra marathon runners and so forth. They talk about resilience. I can't share from that point of view. I'm not haven't emphasized that physical, ruggedness and so forth over my life. But there's still an aspect where we need to push harder. Sometimes it's not the only response, but sometimes it's the best way. So armoring ourselves. So patience is sometimes likened to be an armor, where no matter what comes to us, we won't be disturbed. And so this is a powerful aspect of patience, just thinking, just as if I'm wearing this armor of patience, no matter what comes at me, I'm not going to be disturbed. I'm going to be totally resilient. And sometimes just through the force of our determination and admiring, praising, loving this mind of patience, that alone can help us to sustain this determination in the face of difficulties. And then redoubling our efforts, increasing our efforts on the basis of that armoring. So those are some different directions that all are relevant. I'll go into some of the other aspects on Tuesday. I'll go into some of the other aspects on new ways of what you call cognitive resilience, where just new ways of framing or thinking about things. But because we are storytelling primates, the story we tell ourselves about the situation changes it entirely. So if you tell yourself a different story, that this story is that this disappointment is my opportunity to learn, for example. If you just tell yourself that story, this is my encouragement to learn, it helps, right? It changes your point of view, changes your perspective, and that story helps us to approach it in a different way. If we if we think that patience is actually, well, they say patience is a virtue. If we think that patience is a virtue, that we want to build this strength and this ability to remain calm in the face of difficulties, that itself is a story. We're telling ourselves this story that I can be calm and peaceful no matter what's happening in my life, and that story helps us to weather these difficulties better. Okay, so So why don't we take, with the time we have now, what we can do is to take a bit of time for meditation. And what we can think about is a difficult situation that we faced in our life that perhaps really challenged our, that where we lost confidence, we encountered some disappointment, some pain, some frustration, but we can replay that situation in our mind and try to imagine, could we approach that with an inner calm? Could we approach that with a mind of resilience instead of a mind of giving up and being defeated by it? So thinking through these scenarios, we can actually rehearse in our mind and change the way we react to these disappointments. Okay, so we can find, again, a comfortable position for our meditation. You can close your eyes or look down. And we can bring to mind a situation where we were going in a good direction, where we felt like we were moving in the right direction, but then we encountered some obstacle and lost our momentum. We felt like we were disappointed, frustrated, had loss, pain, fear. Just try to bring this situation to mind. And we can try to notice how we're feeling in our body, how that situation makes us feel, and where we're feeling it in our body. And we could ask ourselves, what if we could go into that situation maintaining a sense of inner calm, maintaining a sense of peace without panic, without overreacting. And we think, what would it be like if we were to encounter that situation while remaining calm? we can think about patience. We can think every situation, good or bad, painful or pleasant, has arisen because of some causes and conditions. There's some reasons bringing this into existence. And if we recognize this, we can accept the reality of the situation without feeling it should be different from how it is. We can try to reflect on the situation, feeling a sense of inner calm and recognizing that it has arisen due to causes and conditions. And we can think, what if I could move into every situation in my life with this mind of calm and patience, accepting the world as we find it, and then acting from there, making improvements, taking action from the way things are right now, not the way we want them to be. We can think, even just through this brief time together, our minds have changed, our life has moved in some slightly different direction. We can think, what if what if we kept making steps and moves in this beneficial direction? What kinds of good results could arise for ourselves and others? And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. So thank you everybody so much. I'm very, very happy to be able to spend some time with you on Saturday, although virtual, nevertheless, still wonderful. And so this is the formal